Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Dear students, you are welcome in this class. So today we are going to discuss the introduction to the essential plant nutrients. So learning objectives of this lecture are to understand the meaning of essential plant nutrient elements and the criteria for essentiality of plant nutrients, and then learn the classification of nutrients and identify their toxicity or deficiency symptoms. So, before that I would like to discuss some terminology which many times students find difficult to understand. So, therefore, I would like to simplify these terms. Chlorosis, it is a nutrient stress condition in plants associated with the loss of chlorophyll resulting in loss of green color. Means chlorosis means just yellowing of the plant parts, maybe leaves, maybe nodes, maybe any other part. Necrosis, it is death of the plant tissues, usually accompanied by discoloration, and may also occur due to nutrient deficiency, and sometimes necrosis also occur due to toxicity. However, many times we see that this necrosis is also occur due to virus infections. Sometimes viral infections are also there in plant which cause necrosis also. Nutrient, a nutritive substance or ingredient such as the major and minor elements necessary for growth and development of the plant. Nutrient antagonism. Antagonism means opposition, kind of opposition, the suppressing effect caused by one or more plant nutrients on the uptake and availability of another nutrient. So, this nutrient antagonism may occur within the soil and within the plant also. Sometimes this happens in soil, one element will affect the availability or uptake of the other, and sometimes they also interact adversely within the plant system, within the cell or during the transport. So, such kind of processes are grouped under the nutrient antagonism. Nutrient availability, the extent to which soil nutrients are available for the plant use, that is nutrient availability. Nutrient deficiency means a low concentration of an essential nutrient element that reduces the plant growth and prevents completion of its normal life cycle. Nutrient removal or uptake, they are the same. Sometimes people call them nutrient removal and sometimes they call it nutrient uptake. Means the accumulation of the nutrient in the above ground parts, maybe leaves, maybe stem, shoot, whatever it is, that is your nutrient removal. So, amount of each nutrient removed from the soil in the harvested crop is your nutrient removed. Nutrient stress occurs when the quantity of nutrient available reduces the plant growth. It can be from either a deficient or toxic concentration. Means in either case, whether a nutrient is deficient or is in excess, in both the cases it may lead to the nutrient stress. Now, essential plant nutrients. So, this has been very important subject of discovery by people in biochemistry, plant physiology or soil science. Over the years or over the decades or centuries, they have tried to know that do we have all the elements essential for plant growth, whatever are found in nature. In general, there may be more than 110 elements, natural elements which have been discovered up till now, but all the 110 elements are not found in the plant ash. When people burnt the ash, you can find at the most 60 or 65 elements. So, all the 105 or 110 elements are not there in the plant. So, plant physiologists thought that do we really need all these nutrients as essentially. So, later on it was found that all the 60 elements which are there in the plant ash are not necessary for the plant growth. So, therefore, there must be certain criteria to be an essential element. So, before that, before going into the criteria, I would like to explain to you about the element. What is an element? Element is the purest form of a substance, and which is made up of similar kind of atoms, and it has fixed atomic number. That is called as an element. So, all these elements may be, some may be metallic, some may be non-metallic elements. So, which element to be called as essential? So, for this Anand and Stout 1939, they have given some criteria. If an element qualifies all the three criteria, then it will become essential element or essential nutrient element for the plant growth. So, criteria are three. Number one, a deficiency of the element makes it impossible for a plant to complete its life cycle. Means if without this particular element, a plant is not able to complete its normal life cycle or reproduction, will be essential nutrient. Number two, the same element must pass the second criteria, which is the deficiency is specific for the element in question. Means if the deficiency of A element is there, then it can be corrected only by providing the A element. Deficiency of A element cannot be substituted or replaced by B element. So, therefore, the deficiency is specific for the element. The element is directly involved in the nutrition of the plant. For example, as a constituent of an essential metabolic or required for the action of an enzyme, means the element should be directly involved in the plant metabolic activities like respiration, photosynthesis, formation of chlorophyll, protein synthesis, or some other kind of metabolic activities of the plant. If one particular element qualifies all these three criteria, then we can call it as essential plant element or essential plant nutrient. The essentiality of most micronutrients for higher plants was established during 1922 to 1954. The essentiality of nickel in 1987 by Brown and co-workers was the latest one, and list may not be final. It is probable that more elements may prove to be essential. With the development of science, with the development of instrumentation and facilities, sometimes in future it is also assumed that there may be to this list some nutrient may be added, some more nutrient may be added to the list. Now, see the chronology of discoverers or discoveries of essential nutrient elements for higher plants. See the first column, it is element, name of the element, and discovery of essentiality, who discovered a particular nutrient element as essential, and then year. So, students should see this history carefully, because many times these questions are asked from the students, and you are expected to know answer of these things also. So, for example, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and nitrogen, the discoverer of essentiality was de Saussure in 1804. Then phosphorus discoverer of essentiality was Ville in 1860. For sulfur, it was von Sach-Knopp 1865. For potassium, calcium, magnesium and iron essentiality, it was again von Sach-Knopp in 1860. And for manganese, McHargue 1922. For copper, Lippmann and McKinney in 1931. For zinc, Somner and Lippmann, they discovered the essentiality of zinc 1926. For molybdenum, Anand and Stout 1938. For boron, Warrington, and then year was 1923. For chlorine, Brouwer et al. 1954. For nickel, it was Brown and co-workers 1987. So, this was added by Brown, and they found it essential for growth of barley, germination of barley seeds. So, they established it, and after that no element has been added to the list of essential elements. So, nickel is the latest, added in 1987. Now, essentiality of mineral elements for higher and lower plants. So, whatever list is there, there are 17 essential elements for higher plants, but do all these essential elements are also necessary, are also essential for lower plants like fungi or bacteria. So, in this table you can see the first column says classification, macronutrient, micronutrient and so on, then name of the element, then is it required for higher plant essentially or not, and then for lower plants. So, see the case of macronutrient, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, magnesium, calcium. So, it is definitely needed for higher plants. You see the positive sign. Then for lower plants all these are required, but calcium is the exception for fungi. That means all other are essential like nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium and magnesium for lower plants, but calcium is not essential for fungi. See the micronutrients. It is iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, chloride and nickel. These are micronutrients and they are definitely required by the higher plants, but for lower plants boron is the exception of fungi, means boron is not needed by lower plants. However, lower plants fungi requires iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, chloride and nickel. Now, see some more elements, micronutrients and beneficial elements. So, these are sodium, silicon and cobalt. For some higher plants this group may be essential and for some it may not be essential, but sodium, silicon and cobalt are not essential for all higher plants, but for some higher plants they are essential. Similarly, for lower plants the same case is with the lower plants. Then beneficial element like iridium, vanadium, for higher plants they are not essential and for lower plants they may or may not be essential. You can see the plus and minus sign, it means may or may not be essential. Now, classification of essential plant nutrients, how they are classified. So, most of the people agree to this kind of classification where you can broadly divide all these nutrient elements into two groups. One is framework element, they are mostly taken from air and water. They are three in number: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, because they make up the main skeleton of the plant. Like our skeleton also, mostly it is carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So, carbon on an average it is 40 to 42% in the plant, and hydrogen it is 6 to 8% in the plant, and oxygen is also about 40 to 44% in the plants. So, making up to 95%. 95% of the plant's body is made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. The other group number 2 is mineral elements. So, the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are kind of organic elements. They are not considered as mineral elements. In mineral elements, they are mainly taken from the soil in the ionic form. In the ion form, we will see subsequently what kind of ionic forms are there in which plant nutrients are taken by the plants. So, there are 14 mineral elements which are necessary or essential for the normal growth and reproduction of the plants, and they are further divided into two groups: macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are 6 in number and micronutrients are 8 in number. So, macro and micronutrients means it is the relative requirement or concentration of these nutrients in the plant body. Means macronutrients are required in larger amounts, therefore, they are called as macronutrients, and micronutrients are required in very minor amounts, very less quantities, therefore, they are called as micronutrients. However, the function or role of micronutrients is very, very indispensable. You supply all the 7 micronutrients to the plant and all the primary and secondary nutrients to the plant, but you forget to supply one nutrient, say you forget to supply boron, then plant will not succeed in its life cycle. So, they are important, they are very indispensable for the life of the plants. So, these macronutrients are of course 6 in number and they are further divided into two groups: primary nutrients, they are 3 in number, and then secondary nutrients, they are also 3 in number. So, primary nutrients and secondary nutrients. So, in primary we have nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. In secondary nutrient category we have calcium, magnesium and sulfur. And in micronutrient we have 8 micronutrients. They are zinc, copper, manganese, iron, boron, molybdenum, chlorine and nickel. So, many times students do mistake. If I ask you that how many nutrients are essential for plant growth, mostly you answer 16, but it should be 17. You should answer 17 because nickel is the latest addition to the list of the essential micronutrients. Now see the forms of essential elements absorbed by the plants. So they are absorbed in cation form as well as anion form. Some nutrient like nitrogen is absorbed in both forms, ammonical form as well as nitrate form. Ammonical form is generally preferred by rice and some other aquatic plants, and nitrate forms is mostly preferred by mesophytic plants. Xerophytic plants means plants which are growing in moderate supply of water or in deficiency of water. So you can see in cations, macronutrients, it is ferric. Iron is taken up in the form of ferric, Fe3+, but this is not the preferred form. Preferred form of iron is ferrous. So ferrous is Fe2+. So if we see the cations, in macronutrients, cations are calcium 2+, magnesium 2+, and in micronutrients, if we see, it is ferrous, manganese, zinc, copper and nickel. All have 2 charge. They are having 2 positive charges. They are cations. Similarly, cation with 1 charge is potassium and ammonium. And there is neutral charge also. Boron is absorbed as boric acid. This is quite interesting fact. Many of you may not be knowing that boron is taken up or absorbed in boric acid form. It is the only exception which is not taken in ionic form. It is directly absorbed as H3BO3, or you can write BOH3. Then we have anions with 1 valency or 1 charge or 2 charge. This is in minus. So if it is -1, then it is nitrate, and H2PO4 is orthophosphate, and then chloride, -1 charge. Then anion with -2 charge is HPO4, phosphate, sulfate and molybdenate. These are the ions. So by now I think you know what are the different ionic forms of the nutrients. Now we discuss in detail about the framework nutrient elements. They are carbon, oxygen and hydrogen. And carbon and oxygen comes mainly from the carbon dioxide. Most of you understand the process of photosynthesis. During the photosynthesis, plants make their food in the presence of light and carbon dioxide, and they take a water from the soil. So that way carbon is reaching to the plants through the photosynthesis process, and oxygen also comes in carbon dioxide. Then about hydrogen, it is coming mostly from the water, H2O. This hydrogen comes. So these 3 elements required in large quantities for the production of cellulose or starch, hence framework elements. They are about 95% of the plant biomass is carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, and the remaining 5% is made up of the mineral elements. So see, larger part is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. But do the farmers manage this carbon, hydrogen, oxygen for the plant? Mostly not. See, carbon dioxide, whatever there in the environment, this cannot be manipulated, this cannot be changed. Whatever concentration of carbon dioxide is there in the atmosphere, that will remain fixed. So farmers have no choice. Whatever air is giving, whatever carbon dioxide is coming from the air, plant depend for that. However, water supply can be manipulated, can be managed by farmers. Sometimes there may be deficiency of water, hence there may be deficiency of hydrogen in the plant, but that is not in the perspective of plant nutrition. Most of the time, whatever hydrogen is required, sufficient hydrogen is supplied by water. Now we see mineral nutrient elements. They are 14 in numbers. So most of them are discussed under the subject of mineral nutrition of plants, and you must be knowing about a very decent book, Mineral Nutrition of Higher Plants, that is quite common for this subject. I would like you to see that book, Mineral Nutrition of Higher Plants, written excellently on this subject. So 14 elements, mineral nutrients, are taken in mineral form or inorganic forms. 2 groups, these are macro and micronutrients. You have seen the classification as per the relative amounts required. The difference in plant concentration between macronutrients and micronutrients is enormous. Some may be in percentage and some may be in ppm. Micronutrients may be in ppm, microgram per gram, or milligram per kg. However, certain nutrients, macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus or potassium, they may be expressed in percentages. So, the relative amount of nitrogen and molybdenum in plants is in the ratio of 10,000 is to 1. You can see the difference in the concentration of these two elements. Nitrogen is 10,000 and this molybdenum is only 1 part. Now, you see this table, this is quite interesting. See the case of, this is the typical concentration of nutrient elements sufficient for plant growth. In the first column, you have list of the elements, then symbol of the elements, then milligram per kg. This is the concentration, typical concentration in the plants in milligram per kg, and then in percentage. For some elements, the data is converted into percentage, then relative number of atoms of different elements. See the case of nitrogen. Symbol is N. In plants, on an average, it is 15,000 milligram per kg, and if we convert it into percentage, this is 1.5%, and the relative number of atom is 10 million, 10 to the power 6, 10 million you can say. Then potassium is, symbol is K, 10,000 ppm is the concentration, approximately 1% potassium is there on an average in the plant parts, and it is 250,000 relative number of atoms compared to nitrogen. Then calcium, you see 5,000 or 0.5%, and the relative number of atom is 125,000. Then see the case of magnesium. Symbol is Mg, and it has 2000 milligram per kg, which is equivalent to 0.2% concentration, and relative number of atom is 60,000. Another macronutrient or secondary nutrient, you see sulfur, which is having 1000 ppm concentration, and in percentage 0.1%, and 30,000 is the relative number of atoms. Now, surprisingly see the case of zinc. Just see the zinc, symbol is Zn, and the concentration in plant is 20 milligram per kg, and it is just 300. See the nitrogen, it is 10 million in case of, 1 million in case of nitrogen, but here in case of zinc it is just 300 number. So, atoms of in a particular tissue or particular part of the plant, the atomic, this is the ratio of the two elements, nitrogen and zinc. Likewise, nickel will have just 1 atom and nitrogen will have 1 million atoms. So, this is the huge difference between the concentration of macronutrients and micronutrients. Now, macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium and sulfur, these are the macronutrients, and now nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium are often called as primary nutrients and are the most common elements found in commercial fertilizers, and farmers also give primary importance to these nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. Even illiterate farmer, he knows about these fertilizers or these nutrients. He easily tells us that I supply nitrogen from urea. So, farmers are aware of certain fertilizer and nutrients. Then comes your calcium, magnesium and sulfur. They are often referred as secondary nutrients and are also found in fertilizers and soil amendments. So, in no way they are secondary to the primary nutrients, but it has been a convention or tradition to call them secondary nutrients. Take the case of sulfur. Sulfur is almost required in the same quantity as phosphorus. So, same concentration of phosphorus and sulfur in plants. Both are also part of the proteins. So, but sulfur is kept under the category of secondary nutrients, and also farmers do not give primary importance to sulfur. They give primary importance to phosphorus. Therefore, some groups have been made as primary nutrients and secondary nutrients. Then micronutrients include iron, manganese, zinc, boron, copper, chloride, molybdenum and nickel, and they are required in relatively minute quantities and rarely limit plant growth in the environment. But that is not true actually. Now these days we are experiencing the micronutrient deficiencies in Indian soils. In one of the lecture I have discussed about the status of Indian soils in micronutrients. So, cobalt, sodium, vanadium and silicon are sometimes called as beneficial nutrients. They are not essential, but in some cases these beneficial nutrients have been found quite useful. See the case of cobalt. Cobalt is very important and necessary for nitrogen fixation by legume plant. Similarly, sodium gives benefit to the sugarcane crop, and silicon is also useful in rice and many cereal crops. Some response is being received for silicon application in maize, in sugarcane, in rice and so on, because they play some other role also. Silicon, for example, in rice, it prevent some diseases in rice plant. So, that is how they are beneficial elements and not required by all plants, but appear to benefit certain kind of plants, these cobalt, sodium, vanadium and silicon. Cobalt is required for nitrogen fixation in legumes. Almost it has indispensable or essential role. Silicon found in plant cell walls and produces tougher cells, increases the resistance of plants to piercing and sucking insect and diseases, the spread of fungal diseases. So, see, the silicon is very, very important. It prevents the infestation of certain insect pests and diseases in crop plants. So, it acts as a beneficial element. Now, there is yet another classification which was proposed by Mengel and Kirkby in 2001. So, this is classification of essential plant nutrients on the basis of biochemical and physiological functions in plant. In plant, number of biochemical and physical processes happen like photosynthesis, esterification, respiration, protein synthesis, fat synthesis, hormonal synthesis, variety of functions are there in the plant. So, based upon the biochemical physiological functions, Mengel and Kirkby divided these essential elements into 4 groups. The group 1 includes carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and sulfur. You can see in the list, and the biochemical function is they are major constituent of organic material, essential elements of atomic groups which are involved in enzymatic processes also, and they are also part of the proteins also, this nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. Group 2 includes phosphorus and boron. They are used for esterification with native plant alcohol, and phosphate esters are involved in energy transfers. Then third group they divided is potassium, magnesium, calcium, manganese and chlorine. They have non-specific functions, and their major role is in establishing osmotic potential. Particularly this potassium and chloride have very important role in maintaining the osmotic potential at cellular level. Then the fourth and last group includes iron, copper, zinc and molybdenum. They present predominantly in a chelated form in prosthetic group, enable electron transport by valency change. Now, primary nutrients. NPK are often referred to as primary nutrients and are the most common elements found in commercial fertilizers. We have variety of fertilizer like urea, ammonium sulphate, ammonium phosphate and so many fertilizers are there. Similarly, for phosphorus we have SSP, single superphosphate, DAP and some more fertilizer. For potassium we mostly use muriate of potash or potassium sulphate fertilizers, and they are frequently managed by the addition of fertilizers to the soils, while the others are usually found in sufficient quantities in most soils and no soil amendments are usually used. Now, you can see this picture. This is the relative uptake of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. On the x-axis you have uptake of nutrients, the name of the nutrients. On y-axis you have NPK uptake. So, it is actually primary nutrients are usually lacking in soil because plant use them in large amounts for their growth and survival. See the case of nitrogen. On an average, the uptake by rice crop yielding 5 tons of per hectare, it will remove at least 120 kilograms of nitrogen, which is a huge amount. And similarly, the same rice crop which produces 5 tons per hectare of the rice yield will also remove 130 kilograms of potassium, but it will remove only 20 kilograms of phosphorus. So, you can see the relative uptake of potassium, nitrogen and phosphorus. For potassium it is 130, for nitrogen 120 and for phosphorus it is just 20 kg. For nitrogen, you can remember, it is very easy to remember, for every ton of grain in rice, maize or wheat, there is about 20 kilogram nitrogen removal by cereal crops. You can remember at least this value. Suppose there is 6 tons of yield per hectare in case of maize, then you multiply this 6 by 20, you will get 120 kg. So, likewise, you can calculate it for other crops also. Now, deficiency, toxicity and role of essential nutrients. Let us see this picture. It shows us the plant growth in relation to the availability of the nutrients. So, the nutrient availability may be under two conditions. Number one condition will be when the nutrient supply is not sufficient. Other condition may be when the nutrient supply is in excess. So, when there is deficiency or nutrient supply is less, limited, then the plant will show deficiency symptoms, and when you put nutrient in excess, particularly micronutrients, it will show toxicity symptoms. So, that is the difference between deficiency and toxicity. Deficiency is due to shortage and toxicity is due to excess of particular element. So, please see this picture carefully. Plant growth and yield dependence on nutrient supply. So, this is picture C. Please see the x-axis. On x-axis you have nutrient concentration in soil or plant. In soil it is called as content, nutrient content in soil. In plant it is concentration. So, which is moving on x-axis, it is increasing. Also see the y-axis where there is increasing growth or increasing yield. This is very kind of this, and then you see y-axis, it is increasing growth or yield, and then you can see as we are increasing the concentration of nutrient in soil or plant, the deficiency is reducing. In the beginning, when there is very little supply of nutrient, you see it is acute deficiency. Please seek your attention, just see the acute deficiency when the concentration of nutrient is low. Then you increase the concentration of the nutrient, then you go to latent or hidden deficiency zone, where you find critical values. See the critical values, which is about at 90% of the maximum possible growth or maximum possible yield. You must be seeing the 100%, the value written 100%. 100% is not achievable here. Here only 90% is achievable, where you get critical value. Then comes the next zone, you still go on supplying the nutrient in soil, or you still go on adding more concentration in the plant tissues, then we get optimal supply. Optimal supply, and you still continue to increase the concentration of nutrient in plant or content of nutrient in soil, then certain elements will be utilized luxurially or luxury consumption. You still increase the concentration, then there will be light toxicity, and again increase in the concentration acute toxicity. So, you can see the optimal supply is somewhere between acute deficiency or acute toxicity. None of them, whether it is acute or deficiency or acute toxicity, none of them is desirable. Better to go for optimal supply, because luxury supply is also not good. So, we will see in details about all these 6 conditions of nutrient availability: acute deficiency, latent deficiency, optimal supply, luxury supply, light toxicity and acute toxicity. We will see one by one in detail. But before that, you see the critical concentration. Critical concentration is dependent upon the stage of the crop, kind of crop, and also the plant part sampled and the stage of the growth. So, many factors affect the critical concentration, because in the last slide you have seen it was 90% possible yield, maximum possible yield, we get critical concentration of nutrient in soil or plant. So, now this is deficiency and toxicity, critical concentration of various elements in the rice plant. This is just to give you some idea that what levels of a particular nutrient are falling under deficiency and what levels are falling under toxicity. So, I start with nitrogen. See D4 deficiency. For nitrogen, if critical concentration is 2.5%, Where? In the plant blade. At what stage? Till for tilling. Means in rice at tilling stage, in leaf blade, if your nitrogen concentration is 2.5%, then it is deficiency of nitrogen. Similarly, for phosphorus, if at tilling in rice in leaf blade, if the concentration of phosphorus is 0.1%, then it is also deficiency. So far toxicity of phosphorus in rice is concerned, it is 1% critical concentration, means if you move above 1%, then the toxicity symptom will come in the straw. It is in the straw at maturity. At maturity in the straw of rice, if you have 1% or more of the phosphorus, then it will be toxic to the rice plant. Then come to iron. You need to see all, but I am giving you just few examples from this table. Just see case of iron. The deficiency of iron in rice will happen when you have 70 ppm, which is the critical concentration, 70 ppm concentration of the leaf blade. Means leaf blade was sampled and it is at tilling stage. And toxicity you see 300 ppm in the leaf blade at tilling stage. So, for iron the range sufficiency range is from 70 to 30, 300 ppm, means it should not go 70 or below, or it should not go high above 300, where you will have toxicity symptoms. So, you need to find out the optimal supply. And also see, it is quite interesting that the difference in deficiency and toxicity is very small, very marginal in case of micronutrient. 70 ppm deficiency, 300 ppm toxicity. So, this is very marginal. So, we need to manage micronutrients efficiently, because if we put some extra amount or extra available micronutrient, then that can become toxic also. Similar is the case of salt. When people eat salt in the food, they keep very small amount. It is good, it is liked by everyone. But if you increase salt concentration or salt amount in your food, after a certain level you will not taste your food, you will not like this food. So, salt is just like a micronutrient. So, here also very small change in concentration can lead to the toxicity of the nutrient. See the case of manganese. In deficiency it is 20 ppm, and toxicity it is more than 2500 ppm. Which part? In the shoot at tilling stage. See the case of boron. Deficiency at 3.4 ppm. It is very small quantity of boron is present in the plant. So, critical level of concentration of boron is 3.4 ppm, and it is in straw at maturity stage. But toxicity it is just 100 ppm. At 100 ppm boron will be toxic in straw at maturity. Take the case of copper. Deficiency happens when it is less than 6 ppm in straw at maturity, and toxicity at 30 ppm in straw at maturity. See the difference, very marginal difference between deficiency and toxicity. So, application or use of boron or copper or any other micronutrient should be very efficient. Now, the range of nutrient supply from deficiency to toxicity, there are 6 different ranges. I have shown you in the picture. The nutrient status of a plant can range from acute deficiency to acute toxicity. A broad division of nutrient status into 3 groups, namely deficient, optimal and excess, may be useful for general purpose. Everybody want to have optimal level of nutrients in the soil as well in the plant, and that is the job of soil fertility management. For a more accurate assessment of the nutritional status of the plants, detailed categorization is required, in which 6 different ranges can be distinguished: acute toxicity, marginal or latent, deficiency, optimal supply, luxury supply, marginal or light or hidden toxicity, and acute toxicity. Now, see the acute deficiency, means too much deficient. A nutrient is very low in soil or very low in plant, that is acute deficiency of the nutrient, and it is associated with the definite visible symptom and poor growth. This acute deficiency will result in all kind of these visible symptoms or deficiency symptoms, and the growth of the plant will be affected. Growth in terms of plant height, growth in terms of tilling if it is a tilling crop, growth in respect of increase in size of leaves or number of leaves, flowers, fruiting, these are. So, in that respect the growth of the plant may be affected by acute deficiency. The addition of the deficient nutrient usually results in increased growth and yield. Whenever there is such kind of acute deficiency, if you apply that nutrient, if you supply that nutrient, it definitely compensates for the deficiency and it overcomes the issue, and ultimately one will get better growth and yield. This range should be avoided as its occurrence is a sign of low nutrient supply or poor nutrient management and ultimately poor crop performance. We should not wait for the soil to reach to that level of acute deficiency. Much before that we should apply the nutrients. Number 2, second phase could be that marginal or latent deficiency. This is still higher concentration of nutrient in plant and higher content of nutrient in soil as compared to the acute deficiency. So, it is a small range with or without visible deficiency symptoms. This is quite interesting. Here the symptoms of deficiency may or may not be visible. So, plants suffer hiddenly, means it is not known, but plant is suffering under this. So, growth and yield are reduced. Addition of the yield limiting nutrient result in higher yields, but this may not be visible. Optimal nutrient supply prevents hidden hunger. So, we need to operate in the region of optimal supply, where even there will not be any hidden hunger to the plant. Now, optimal supply, this is the most desirable supply of nutrient in the soil or nutrient content in the plant. This is the range to aim for. Farmers aim to achieve this. Here all nutrients are at the most desired level. In this range, healthy green plants, good growth and high yields with good quality can be expected. And further, not just good quality or quantity of the plant produce, but it is also very important from point of view of economics. Here farmers will get maximum profit in this zone. So, this range is generally wide for most nutrients. The optimal supply is reached above the critical concentration, which is generally associated with 90% of maximum yield. The critical concentration serves as a diagnostic index for nutrient supply through plant analysis. The fourth stage means you have beyond, still some farmers apply nutrients, you are still adding nutrients after optimal supply, which is quite common in some places, some areas. So, plant may accumulate excess of that applied nutrients, which is luxury consumption. Although there is no definite borderline between optimal and luxury consumption or luxury supply, it is useful to identify this range of unnecessarily high nutrient supply. Even if there may not be any negative effect on plant growth or yield, nutrient input is wasted and product quality as well as disease resistance may be reduced, especially in the case of excess nitrogen. If there is excess supply of nitrogen, then the reproductive stage of plant may be affected, particularly in case of leguminous plants like chickpea. If you increase nitrogen supply, if you apply nitrogen in excess externally, then it will lead to increased vegetative growth, and in the end the branching, the secondary branches will be less, the production of flower will be affected, and finally production of pod and seed will be affected. It will produce less seed yield, this chickpea, due to excess nitrogen. Similarly, potassium can be accumulated by potato crop sometimes, or rather in case of excess supply or where soils have very high levels of potassium. In that case, potassium may be accumulated in the potato crop, but it will not affect the potato crop adversely. Rather, it will be just luxury consumption, means useless consumption, or it could have been avoided. The luxury consumption of a nutrient should be avoided. In other words, optimal supply should be maintained and not exceeded except in special cases, such as the need for protein enrichment in grain for quality consideration. The fifth stage or phase is marginal or light toxicity. Now, you have crossed the luxury consumption, now it has come to the toxicity level. Here the nutrient concentration is moving towards toxicity. Above the critical toxic concentration, crop growth and yield start to decrease because of the harmful effects of nutrient surplus or of toxic substances on biochemical processes, and imbalances are also caused. So, note symptoms may be evident as in the case of hidden hunger. So, here also it is kind of hidden toxicity. Symptoms are not visible, but plant may suffer or plant is suffering. So, this stage should also be avoided. How we can avoid this stage? Just by testing the soil or testing the plants, the status of nutrients, and we can see the ratio of the nutrients, critical concentration of the nutrient, how much it has exceeded, and according to that we can manipulate certain soil or plant conditions. Then acute toxicity, the last stage, the final stage of nutrient availability and uptake. This is the other extreme of excessive supply or poor nutrient management. Poor means here inefficient nutrient management. Thing is not required and still you are adding it into the soil. This is just useless or wasteful. So, plants are damaged by toxic levels resulting in toxicity symptoms, poor or no growth, poor yield, low quality, and damage to soil and plant health. This is important. And not only this, many times in acute toxicity or luxury consumption, certain disease and insect pest incidences are invited, unnecessarily invited. If you put too much of nitrogen, excess nitrogen accumulated, it will invite more insect pests and disease to the crop plants. So, that way also it is harmful. The disease resistance of plant may lose or may also be lowered, and the plant may even die in some cases due to acute toxicity. There are cases of acute iron toxicity, aluminum toxicity, manganese toxicity, copper toxicity in rice and some other crops because of excess availability and excess accumulation of these nutrients in plant. Iron toxicity in rice, particularly in acidic soils, is quite common in Assam and in some other eastern states of India. So, this range should definitely be avoided for any nutrient. Particularly, we need to be very cautious about the micronutrients. They should not cross the limits. The next concept is nutrient mobility and its effect on deficiency symptoms. Because we know these deficiency symptoms, sometimes they occur on the lower leaves, sometimes they occur on the middle leaves, and sometimes on the younger leaves or new plant parts. So, it is important to understand the mobility of the nutrients within the plant, how they move. Do they move fast? Do they move slow? What is kind of a speed through which they move in the plant system? So, the redistribution of nutrient from the original place of deposition is difficult for the immobile nutrients. They will remain where they have been kept or where they have been asked to remain. The appearance of deficiency symptoms on older leaves indicates the shortage of a mobile nutrient because plant can transport some nutrient from old to new leaves. For example, nitrogen and phosphorus. They can be easily transported from their region of higher concentration to their region of lower concentration. That is why it is mobile nutrient. Nitrogen, phosphorus and potash are considered as mobile nutrients because they are redistributed easily in the plant and their deficiency will appear on the older leaves or older plant parts. The appearance of deficiency symptoms on younger leaves or the new growth indicates the shortage of an immobile nutrient because of lack of supply from older to younger leaves. This can also happen because these immobile nutrients, they are mostly confined to the lower portion of the plant and they are not normally distributed in the higher portion of the plant, particularly in case of deficiency. So, symptoms of deficiency of such immobile nutrients will be visible on the younger leaves or younger tissues or new growth of the crop plants. Examples are sulfur and copper. There are 5 typical deficiency or toxicity symptoms on the plant and students need to remember these 5 symptoms. In most of the deficiency or toxicity cases, you will observe these kind of symptoms with some specific symptoms to the nutrient or specific to the crop. So, chlorosis means greening or yellowing of the leaves or plant parts. From dark green they become yellow. This is known as chlorosis. And chlorosis may happen due to several reasons. Maybe due to iron deficiency, maybe due to sulfur deficiency, or maybe due to nitrogen deficiency. It becomes many times difficult to say the reason for chlorosis. Sometimes viral or virus infection can lead to chlorosis, sometimes bacterial infection, sometimes reduced supply of oxygen in the soil will also lead to chlorosis. So, there are so many reasons, but still it acts as a good indicator for nutrient deficiencies. The next type of deficiency symptom is necrosis. Necrosis is death of the plant tissue, sometimes in spots. So, many times the plant tissues die and they do not recover. It happens mainly in case of say potassium, where the tissues die and they cannot recover once they have died. There may be in case of certain deficiency or toxicity symptoms, there may be accumulation of anthocyanin. Anthocyanin is a pigment which is mostly purple or violet in color, resulting in a purple or reddish color, and lack of new growth. Lack of new growth, sometimes there may not be new growth and plant may remain stunted, particularly in case of phosphorus or in case of calcium. Stunting or reduced growth, new growth continues, but it is stunted or reduced compared to normal plants. And there may be some crop specific symptoms like reduction in the number of tillers, reduction in the size of the leaf or height of the plant and so forth, or leaf area index is a good measure. So, such kind of indirect measurements. Now, factors for nutritional disorders in plant. Definitely two kind of disorders are there. One may be due to deficiency and other may be due to toxicity related to plant nutrients. And these disorders are required to be managed well by the farmers or by the cultivators. So, we need to discuss all these factors which are responsible for different nutritional disorders. In plant, we find variety of diseases due to shortage of nutrients. Sometimes due to excess of nutrient, we find problems. So, for example, nitrogen deficiency results in many kind of diseases or problems in the plant. Similarly, phosphorus, potassium or take any nutrient element, many diseases occur due to deficiency of this boron. Boron is very important for cauliflower. Molybdenum is also very important for cauliflower. Whiptail disease of cauliflower is caused by deficiency of molybdenum and so on. So, these nutrients are very important. Zinc deficiency will lead to Khera disease in rice. So, we need to supply zinc in case of rice. So, there are many diseases which are ascribed to the nutritional disorders. They are due to deficiency or excess of nutrients. So, we must understand the factors which are responsible for nutritional disorders. So, for example, these are 6 factors, broader groups. Number 1 is soil factors, soil texture, pH, organic matter, calcium carbonate content, type of clay minerals, soil moisture, temperature and climate. They will affect actually the availability of the nutrients. Some of these properties will encourage the deficiency of the nutrients, and in certain conditions they will encourage the increased availability of the nutrients. For example, texture of the soil. If you have sandy soils and you apply nitrogen into it, it is not going to stay for a long time, because it is easily washed down by the process of leaching, or it can be denitrified. There may be more losses of nitrogen from the coarse texture soil compared to the fine texture soil. Therefore, for nitrogen deficiency, say this is just one example how the texture is affecting the nutritional disorder. So, in lighter soil or coarse texture soil, there may be more deficiency of nitrogen and more nutritional disorders will be observed compared to the fine texture soils or which is rich in organic matter. Then pH. pH is very important so far nutrient availability is concerned. I have already shown you the value of pH, how it affects the nutrient availability. In lower pH side, you get certain elements more available like your iron, manganese, copper under low pH conditions. At high pH, you get more molybdenum availability, but most of the nutrients are available, highly available at the neutral pH ranging from 6.5 to 7.5. So, we should maintain the right pH if we want to avoid these nutritional disorders. Organic matter definitely very important part of soil. It increases the this carbon content in the soil, and the cation exchange capacity is more, because this organic matter finally produces humus, and humus has very huge cation exchange capacity, means humus can hold your ions. So, soils which have high organic matter will supply nutrients in a better way, in higher amounts or adequate amounts, compared to the soils which are low in organic matter. These are very general statements, but many times they hold true also. So, soils which are rich in organic matter will supply nutrients better than the soils which are not rich in organic matter. It has got several direct and indirect advantages, because of which this nutrient availability affected. Then calcium carbonate content, many times calcium carbonate reduces the availability of certain micronutrients. It also governs the nutrient disorders. Type of clay, if you have more morillonite clay compared to kaolinite clay in soil, more proportion, then your cation exchange capacity is more and it will hold more cations, means deficiency of nutrients will be avoided. Then soil moisture has very important role, because nutrient dissolution or solution of the nutrients, water is necessary, then uptake of nutrient transport happens with the water. So, this moisture, proper moisture is necessary. If you have deficiency of moisture, many nutrients will become unavailable or less available, like iron. Iron availability is more in submerged soil, but it is less in aerobic soil, particularly for rice. Then crop factors, type of crop, variety, root system, root exudates, they all affect, because certain crop may be very sensitive to deficiency of a particular nutrient. Take the case of oil seeds. Oil seeds are quite prone to the deficiency of sulfur. Similarly, potato requires more potassium. So, potassium is prone to deficiency of, potato is prone to the deficiency of potassium. So, also varieties, some varieties are specifically sensitive to the deficiency of a particular nutrient, and so on. Then comes the fertilizers. These days farmers are using mostly straight fertilizer, and previously they were using some mixed fertilizer or some blended fertilizers. Take the case of single superphosphate. Now many farmers have avoided using single superphosphate. Now they have switched over to DAP, diammonium phosphate. This diammonium phosphate gives you only phosphorus and nitrogen, but single superphosphate will give you calcium, it will give you sulfur, it will also give you phosphorus. So, such kind of problems are also affecting the nutrient disorders. Then decreased use of organic manures, continuously the use of organic manure. If farmers are not using these manures, that means your physical, chemical and biological properties of the soils are affected. Ultimately, these properties affect the nutrient availability. If nutrient quantity produced in the soil is less, then definitely one is going to have the nutrient deficiencies. Disposal of urban or industrial waste also reduces the fertility of the soil, and ultimately certain nutritional disorder may happen because of this. And then lack of knowledge about the balanced use. One need to learn the practice, one need to practice the balanced fertilization in the soil. So, just the brief keys of the symptoms for nitrogen. It is mobile, potassium, magnesium, phosphorus, chlorine, sodium, zinc, molybdenum. These all elements are mobile, and immobile are calcium, sulfur, iron, boron and copper. And just brief key symptoms, chlorosis is starting from the leaf tips, it is nitrogen, and symptoms are happening on older leaves. Necrosis on leaf margin, potassium, chlorosis mainly between the veins, magnesium, brownish, grayish, whitish spots on cereus, zinc, reddish color on green leaves or stem is phosphorus deficiency. Then you see the symptoms appearing on the first younger leaves. This is for the immobile nutrients, and these are the examples of immobile nutrients. Mottled yellow green leaves with yellowish veins, sulfur, mottled yellow green leaves with green veins, it is with iron, brownish black spots on legumes, potatoes, manganese, youngest leaf has white tip, copper, youngest leaf is brownish or dead. The example is boron. So, this is all. Thank you very much.